Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
Sometimes God lets you hit rock bottom so that you will discover that He is the rock at the bottom. It's what Pastor Tony Evans says, and it's a fitting way to begin today's episode on the Bible for Busy People. Hi, I'm Erica. It's interesting to me that Jesus chose Peter, a man who failed many times, a man who is flawed, just like you and I fail, just like you and I are flawed. Still, Jesus chose Peter to be the rock on which He would build His church and His ministry, and Peter became that rock. But boy, it was a rocky road to get there, and today we're coming to a very difficult part of Peter's journey. You and I are about to take a walk with Jesus and His disciples as they leave the Last Supper and travel toward the Garden of Gethsemane. My daughter was in Israel just recently. By the way, she had a wonderful time. Her face is still glowing with joy from that experience. But I got to tell you, one of the most fascinating things Hannah said was that while she was in the Garden of Gethsemane, she heard roosters crowing in the distance. Whew. I mean, that is so profound, isn't it? And there's a reason it's profound. Join me in Matthew chapter 26, beginning in verse 30. This is after the Last Supper, for context. Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. On the way, Jesus told them, "Tonight, all of you will desert me. For the scriptures say God will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there." Wow. Peter declared, "Even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you." Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, Peter. This very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." "No," Peter insisted. "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." And all the other disciples vowed the same. Now, because this is the Bible for Busy People, we are going to move down a little bit in Matthew 26 and pick up the story in verse 69. But between the verses you and I just read together and the ones we're about to read, Jesus was betrayed in the Garden of Gethsemane by Judas with a kiss. He was arrested and he was taken to trial. It was a very long night between the Last Supper on Thursday and the crucifixion on Good Friday. But we are going to join Peter now at what I would guess would be the lowest point in his life. So Matthew 26, verse 69. Meanwhile, as I was saying, all of those things were happening to Jesus. Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came over and said to him, "You were one of those with Jesus the Galilean." But Peter denied it in front of everyone. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Later, out by the gate, another servant girl noticed him and said to those standing around, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again, Peter denied it, this time with an oath. "I don't even know the man," he said. A little later, some of the other bystanders came over to Peter and said, "You must be one of them. We can tell by your Galilean accent." Peter swore, "A curse on me if I'm lying. I don't know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. Suddenly, Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." And he went away weeping bitterly. Have you ever wept bitterly, tasted your own salty tears? The Lord Jesus loves you in those moments as much as He loves you when you are on the highest mountaintop and you've gotten everything right. You're loved unconditionally and eternally. Now, one of the things that I particularly appreciate about Jesus is that He's always pointing us toward hope. Remember earlier in Matthew 26, He tells His followers, He tells us, "Look, you guys are all going to desert me and I am going to die, but I will rise again." Can you imagine what it was like to hear those words from Jesus. They didn't have the whole story like you and I do, right? We know what happened on the third day after Jesus was crucified. They didn't have that context. So you can imagine what they were feeling. They wanted to hope, I'm sure, but they were terrified. Peter, when he was standing by that fire, was afraid of dying a grisly death. Remember, these men walked past people who were crucified all the time. They were put on display. And you can imagine the fear that struck Peter's heart. But remember, that fear is going to disappear. His faith is going to grow. And I pray your faith is growing as we study Peter's life, because mine sure is. All right, I want to end today's episode once again with some words from Peter as he becomes the rock that Jesus chose to build his church on. So join me in Peter's first letter to the church, chapter 1, beginning in verse 6. So be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. These trials will show you that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. At that point, Peter was no longer weeping bitterly. I am certain he was weeping tears of joy. He understood what Jesus' mission was. He was no longer seeing things from a human perspective. It was all from God's perspective. Doesn't that give you hope? It sure does me. All right, until next time, you are loved. Thank you so much for listening to the Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or you're ready to go a little deeper in your faith, we've posted some resources for you in our show notes. We'd love for you to share this podcast with a friend and leave us a review. It helps us reach even more people with the hope of Jesus. This podcast is part of Purposely, a podcast network designed with practical podcasts to help you find and live in God's purpose for your life. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at onpurposely.com.